The top law enforcement officer in the United States just got fired, and the story behind it involves explosive secrets, botched trials, and a high-stakes standoff with Congress.
Yeah, I mean, it is a massive collision of legal boundaries, public outrage, and, well, intense political demands, all crashing into the highest levels of the justice system at the exact same time.
Right. The sheer momentum of this story is just incredible. So, President Donald Trump has officially fired Attorney General Pam Bondi,
Exactly. She is out.
supposedly heading to the private sector while her deputy, Todd Blanche, takes over temporarily.
Yeah, that's the official line.
But the paper trail we have on the table today reveals a much deeper story than just a simple career change.
Oh, absolutely.
We are looking directly at the raw materials of this fallout. We've got actual congressional subpoenas, the physical text of House Resolution 1119, which, contains the formal articles of impeachment filed against her.
Right.
And we're also pulling from deep investigative reports from outlets like Common Dreams and The Guardian. We are going to dig into the actual mechanics of how this all happened.
And before we go any further, I want to be very clear with you about our approach today.
Yeah, this is important.
Because this involves highly charged political actions and severe accusations from both left-wing and right-wing figures, our mission today is not to take a side.
Exactly. We aren't endorsing anyone's viewpoint here.
Right. We are simply unpacking the facts, the legal arguments, and the stated accusations exactly as they appear in these documents so you can understand the reality of what is happening.
So you are about to see how the justice system actually operates when the people running it are pushed to their absolute limits.
It gets pretty wild.
It really does. And to understand the timeline of this collapse, we have to start with the single biggest firestorm of her tenure, and that is the Jeffrey Epstein files.
Yeah, this was the catalyst for the entire public fallout.
Set the stage for us. What actually happened?
Well, Congress passed a law called the Epstein Files Transparency Act. And this was not a suggestion or, a gentle request.
Right. It was legally binding.
Exactly. The law gave the Department of Justice a strict deadline of December 2025 to release these investigative records to the public.
And the Department of Justice completely blew past that deadline. They missed December entirely.
Which obviously angered a lot of people.
Right. And when they finally did dump the records in January 2026, it was a staggering release of over 3 million pages of documents.
3 million pages.
Just the sheer logistics of moving that much information is mind-boggling.
Oh, yeah.
But, the delay and the volume are not what caused the massive public outcry. The core controversy found in these sources comes down to the mechanics of how those documents were redacted.
Right, because redacting documents is a standard process in the legal world.
Sure, you take a black marker or whatever.
Yeah, or more accurately today, redaction software, and you block out sensitive information.
Makes sense.
You do this to protect ongoing investigations or to protect the privacy of innocent people.
But that's not what happened here.
No. The congressional documents and news reports show a process that seemed to work in reverse.
In reverse.
Yeah, the DOJ heavily redacted these files to shield powerful figures. The accusations highlight that individuals like Prince Andrew and even Donald Trump had information withheld or covered up specifically to protect them from reputational harm.
Okay, let's unpack this. Because the entire purpose of the Transparency Act was to bring the truth to light.
Right. Transparency. It's in the name.
Exactly. But the sources reveal a glaring, dangerous contradiction. While the DOJ utilized their redaction tools to black out names and protect VIPs, they completely failed to redact the identities of the victims.
Which is just astonishing.
It is. The impeachment resolution clearly states that the DOJ released sensitive documents exposing the personally identifiable information and even nude photographs of dozens of survivors.
It's a massive failure.
I mean, let's think about this. It's like, imagine a bouncer at a club who lets the VIPs slip out the back door in the dark, right? But then shines a massive spotlight directly onto the victims.
That's a perfect way to describe it.
It defies every logical purpose of legal protection. It shields the dangerous elements and exposes the innocent ones.
And what's fascinating here is how the Attorney General's own public statements actively worsened the situation.
Oh, the Fox News interview.
Yes. If we look back to February 2025, during a high-profile interview on Fox News, Pam Bondi made a very specific, explicit claim.
What did she say?
She told the public that an Epstein client list was sitting right on her desk for review.
A physical client list.
That's what she claimed.
And that specific claim set off an absolute firestorm on the internet. Millions of people were suddenly expecting a definitive, undeniable list of names to be published.
Right. It set an expectation of total transparency.
But then we hit July 2025.
Yeah, and a formal Department of Justice memo was released to the public, and that memo completely rules out the existence of any such list.
Wait, completely?
Completely. It states clearly that a singular client list does not exist in the files.
So she hyped up a definitive list on national television, creating massive public anticipation, and then months later, her own department had to publicly admit the list wasn't real.
Exactly, and the fallout from that contradiction was immense.
I can imagine.
A massive coalition of right-wing influencers and media personalities who had been demanding this transparency for years felt entirely misled.
So you have a situation where the right wing is furious about a promised client list that vanished,
Right.
and the left wing, along with the general public, is horrified by the dangerous exposure of vulnerable survivors.
Exactly. Everyone is angry.
And the sources show that lawmakers pressed her to at least apologize to the survivors whose identities and photographs were exposed.
And she refused.
She flat out refused. She told them that apologizing would be getting into the, quote, gutter.
Wow.
Think about the baseline of public trust that is required for the American justice system to function.
It's essential.
When the top law enforcement agency executes a botched 3 million-page document dump that exposes victims, protects the powerful, and is followed by a refusal to apologize, it shatters that trust.
It really does.
And it shattered it across the entire political spectrum simultaneously.
That destruction of public trust was disastrous.
Yeah.
But, public opinion does not fire an attorney general.
True, the president does.
Exactly. And while the public was furious about the Epstein files, the Oval Office was furious about something else entirely.
Let's get into that.
The sources paint a very clear picture of a president who was deeply frustrated with his attorney general's performance in the federal courts.
And this pressure campaign from the White House was not happening in secret, right? It was playing out in real time for everyone to see.
Oh, very publicly. The documents point to a major public breaking point in September 2025.
Right.
President Trump went on his platform, Truth Social, and posted a direct complaint about Bondi. He wrote that she was, quote, all talk, no action.
That's a pretty harsh public review from your boss.
It gets worse. He then explicitly demanded the criminal prosecution of his political opponents.
Naming names.
Yes, specifically naming former FBI Director James Comey, California Representative Adam Schiff, and New York Attorney General Letitia James.
And the Department of Justice actually moved forward on those demands.
They did.
The records show that the DOJ did attempt to prosecute Comey and James. They sought and secured federal indictments against them.
But, and here is the turning point, in November 2025, a federal judge tossed those cases out completely.
Just threw them out.
Completely. And the judge didn't just disagree with the evidence. The judge ruled that the entire prosecution was legally void.
Okay, the mechanics behind why the judge threw the cases out are crucial here.
Very crucial.
The interim U.S. attorney who secured those indictments had been illegally appointed by the DOJ.
Right. The law requires specific procedures, often involving Senate confirmation or strict succession plans under the Federal Vacancies Reform Act, to appoint a U.S. attorney.
You can't just pick someone and give them a badge.
Exactly. If you bypass those procedures and simply place someone in the chair, that person holds no legal authority to wield the power of the government.
Makes sense.
So when a prosecutor with no legal standing files charges, the court has to throw the entire case in the trash. It is a fundamental procedural failure.
Wait, hold on. Here's where it gets really interesting. I'm struggling with the logic here.
Go ahead.
If a boss gives you an impossible or legally dubious task, like finding a way to jail his political rivals, and the federal courts literally step in and stop you because the law forbids the way you are doing it, is it really your fault you failed?
It's a fair question.
I mean, how is an attorney general supposed to navigate that? How can you be punished for the courts blocking an illegal maneuver?
Well, if we connect this to the bigger picture, you are hitting on the fundamental tension of the modern Department of Justice.
Okay, explain that.
Traditionally, the DOJ was designed post-Watergate to operate with a strong degree of independence from the White House.
Right, to prevent exactly this kind of stuff.
Exactly. The goal was to avoid the appearance or the reality of politically motivated prosecutions. The president sets broad policy, but the attorney general is supposed to act as an independent umpire when it comes to specific criminal cases.
But that's not how this administration sees it.
Not at all. These sources outline an administration that operates on a totally different philosophy. They view the Attorney General essentially as the president's personal lawyer and enforcer.
So the expectation wasn't to act as an independent umpire.
No.
The expectation was to secure convictions against specific targets, regardless of the procedural hurdles.
Exactly. There's a quote in the Common Dreams article from Lisa Gilbert, the co-president of Public Citizen, that perfectly encapsulates this dynamic.
What does she say?
She says, quote, "No one can punish Trump's enemies fast enough."
Wow.
According to the reporting, the core mandate from the Oval Office was political retribution.
And she failed to deliver.
Right. When the federal courts blocked those prosecutions due to illegal appointments, Bondi failed to deliver on that mandate. The administration didn't care about the procedural excuse. They cared about the lack of results.
So the White House was furious that she wasn't doing enough to successfully punish their enemies.
Yes.
But at the exact same time, on the other side of Washington, Congress was preparing to impeach her for doing way too much outside the bounds of the law.
The pressure was closing in from both ends.
It's incredible.
The House of Representatives was actively drafting formal articles of impeachment, accusing her of a massive abuse of power.
Let's break down those impeachment articles.
We should.
Because we have the actual text of House Resolution 1119 right here, introduced by Representative Lee. It is a dense, serious document that lays out 5 specific articles of impeachment.
All right. Article 1 focuses on obstructing Congress.
Over the Epstein files.
Yes. The mechanism here is a lawful congressional subpoena. The committee demanded the full, unredacted Epstein files to see exactly what evidence the DOJ was withholding.
And she refused.
Right. Bondi defied that subpoena and refused to hand over the unredacted documents.
Okay, Article 2 ties right back to our earlier discussion. It accuses her of defying the Epstein Files Transparency Act by missing the
A
legally
single vote
binding
in the U.S.
deadlines,
Senate can freeze the
withholding
most
critical
powerful government
documents,
on earth.
and dangerously
But right
exposing
now,
the survivor's
A
identity.
political
Article 3
standoff threatens to
probably
blow
the
up the
most
rules
expansive.
forever.
Oh, yeah. We
This
are
one is
watching the
huge.
fundamental
It
machinery
accuses
of
her
American
of a
lawmaking
broad,
just
systematic
grind
abuse of
to an
investigatory
absolute
and
halt.
prosecutorial
And honestly, the
power.
physical
Give us some
toll on the people
examples.
inside that
The
building
resolution
is
lists
about to
several
become very
specific
real.
aggressive
Right,
actions.
so let's set the scene.
It alleges
It's
she
March
fired
2026.
career ethics staff at the
Picture the
DOJ who
hallways
pushed
of the
back
United
against
States
her
Capitol right
directives.
now.
Firing the ethics
Aides
people,
are literally
not a great
dragging
look.
military-style
And it
cots
details the
into
targeting and
back
prosecution of
offices.
journalists,
Oh, yeah.
specifically
Staffers
naming
are
Don
stockpiling
Lemon
energy
and
drinks by
highlighting
the
the
case.
orchestration of a
We are
police
looking at a
raid
scenario
on the
where
home of
Senators might
Washington
actively
Post reporter
refuse to
Anna
drink water
Nathanson.
Article
just so they don't
3
have to leave
also
the floor
highlights
to
an
use the restroom.
incredibly
Which is
aggressive move
wild,
regarding
and it's all
elections.
because
The
the Senate is
rolls.
completely
The
deadlocked
DOJ
over
demanded
the
that
Save
states
It
hand over
America
their
Act.
Right, that big
unredacted
election
voter rolls.
overhaul bill.
Yeah.
We are
It's
talking
centered
about
around
sensitive
measures like
data,
voter ID
including partial
requirements.
Social Security
Democrats
numbers.
are aggressively
And
blocking this
how did the states
legislation,
react?
and Republicans
At least
desperately
44
want to pass it.
states
But
flat
they
out
lack
refused
the
to
60
comply
votes
with the
required
federal
to
government.
break the
44
stalemate.
states.
Which means
That's huge
frustrations are
bipartisan
just
pushback.
boiling over.
Exactly.
Today,
Federal
you have
courts
28
ultimately had to
Republican
step in
senators,
to
people
stop
like
the
Pete
DOJ,
Ricketts
warning
and
that the
Cynthia
demand
Lummis,
actively
demanding
threatened the right to
that the
vote.
Senate
Which
force
brings
a
us to
grueling,
Article 4.
physical,
Right.
talking filibuster.
This one accuses
They want
her
to
of
force
dismantling
Democrats
the rule
to
of law
stand on the floor
by
and
actively
talk until their
defying the
vocal
courts.
cords just
Defying
give
the
out. And if that
judges.
Yeah, the
fails, they
document
want
alleges
to
her
break the
office
standing rules of the
intentionally
Senate
misled federal
entirely
judges
to
to
force a
obtain
final
search
vote.
warrants.
And the real shocker
It also
dropped
states the
just a few
DOJ
days ago.
presented
Senator John
error-filled
Cornyn,
false information
a man
to
who
grand
fiercely
juries
defended
in
the
an
old
attempt
Senate
to
rules
force
for his
through
entire
those
career.
exact same
Just
political
published
prosecutions
this
the White
fiery
House was
op-ed.
demanding.
Right.
Okay,
saying
and finally,
Republicans
Article
must
5
act now
zeroes
to get
in
this
on
bill
perjury.
passed.
Yeah, he
Lying
said they had
under
to
oath.
deal a
Yes.
fatal blow
It
to the
accuses
rules,
the Attorney General of
which
lying
instantly
under
triggered
oath
a
to
massive
Congress on
public
2
call-out
separate
from former
occasions.
Senator Joe Manchin.
First, it alleges she
Manchin
lied
slammed
during her Senate
Cornyn online
confirmation
for,
hearing when
well,
she
a
explicitly
massive
promised
flip-flop.
not to
Because the rules
politicize
of the
the
Senate
Department
are
of Justice.
quite literally
And the
hanging
second
by a
time,
thread right
It
now.
alleges
I mean, the
she
decisions made in the
deliberately
next few
misled
days
the
will
House
dictate how
Judiciary
American laws are
Committee
written for
regarding
the
the
next
prison
century.
transfer of
Welcome to
Ghislaine
this deep
Maxwell.
dive.
The sources
Today,
indicate
we have
she
a
claimed
custom
to have
mission
no
tailored
knowledge
just
of the
for you.
transfer, a
We're
statement
going to
lawmakers
explore the
determined was false.
swashbuckling, pirate
So with these
origins
5
of the
heavy
filibuster.
articles of
It is a
impeachment hanging
crazy
over her,
history.
it really is.
The situation reached
We'll also
a
break
boiling
down the
point in
terrifying
March.
parliamentary
The
weapon
briefing.
known
Right.
as the nuclear
On March
option.
18th,
And
Bondi
finally,
and
we
her
will
deputy
unpack
went to
a
Capitol Hill for
mind-bending
closed-door
mathematical
briefing.
concept
The
called
goal
the
was to calm
Manchin
the
paradox.
tensions
Right,
regarding the
which
Epstein
proves
files.
exactly why politicians
that
use
go?
gridlock
It
as a
completely
highly
fell apart.
calculated
The Democrats walked out of the
mathematical
room in protest.
strategy.
They did.
So,
They
by
publicly
the end of this
labeled it a
conversation,
fake hearing.
you will hold the
And the
secret
reason they
decoder
walked out
ring
was simple.
for the
Bondi
chaos you
flatly
see on the
refused
news.
to commit to
You will
testifying
understand
under
the
oath.
hidden
Because
game
testifying
theory
under oath
that
is the
drives
critical
these
mechanism of
high-stakes
congressional
showdowns.
oversight.
Absolutely.
Okay, let's
If you
unpack
lie
this.
under oath,
Before
there
we
are
can truly
consequences.
grasp
If you
the
testify
physical
under oath
threats
and
and the
lie,
massive
you can be
stakes
criminally
of
charged
this
with perjury.
2026
Congress
FZB
wanted
America
her
Act
statements
standoff,
on the permanent legal
We
right.
really need to
Which
look at what
makes
the
sense given
filibuster
Article
actually
5.
is.
Right.
And more importantly,
And
how
the
it
day
started.
before that disastrous
Because it
briefing
wasn't designed
on
this way
March
by the
17th,
founders, right?
Right.
Like
the
this
House
wasn't in the
Oversight
blueprint.
Committee
Not at all. If you read the
escalated the
U.S.
situation
Constitution, you will
by
not find the
officially
word filibuster
subpoenaing her
anywhere in the text.
for a formal
nowhere.
deposition
Nowhere.
scheduled for April 14th.
The Constitution
Okay,
basically
so
gives
what
the
does this
Senate
all
the
mean?
authority to
The
set
president
its
just
own
fired
internal
her.
rules.
So back in
She is
1789,
packing
during
up
the
her
very
office
first
and
sessions,
leaving the
debates
government.
ended
Yeah.
with
Does she
a
just
simple
get to
majority
walk
vote.
away from all
Okay,
of
so
this?
51
Does getting
votes and you're
fired
done.
suddenly make a congressional
But there was
subpoena
this
lose its
massive
power?
loophole.
Well, according to
They
the
never
lawmakers driving this
codified a
investigation, the
specific
answer is
procedure to force a
absolutely
vote
not.
to
So she's
happen
still on the
if
hook.
someone simply
The legal
refused to stop
reality of the
talking.
subpoena does not vanish when you
So
lose
without
your
a
job.
mechanism to cut off debate,
We have statements from Representative
politicians
Robert
figured out they
Garcia,
could
the
just,
top Democrat on the
hold the
Oversight
floor
Committee,
hostage.
and
They
Congressman
did.
James
We actually
Walkinshaw.
have
Right.
diaries from
They
the
are
very
ensuring
first
there is
session
no
of the
ambiguity
Senate.
about the next
Pennsylvania
steps.
Senator
Congressman
William McClay
Walkinshaw
wrote down
stated
his flatly,
sheer frustration
quote,
that senators
"Firing
from
her does
Virginia
not
were
end this.
intentionally
She
talking
remains
away the
legally
clock.
obligated
Just to
to
make sure a
appear before
specific bill
Congress and
couldn't
answer
pass.
under
Right.
oath for
They
her failure
literally
to comply with the
weaponized the
law."
clock.
Strong
I mean,
words.
if they were holding the legislative process
Representative
hostage,
Garcia
it makes
echoed
perfect sense
that
why the
exact
press
sentiment.
eventually started calling them
He
pirates.
warned that if the administration
Which brings
thinks
us
the
to the
committee is just
actual
going to move
word
on because she was
filibuster.
fired,
Yeah,
they
it's
are
easily
quote,
one of the strangest
gravely
words in American
mistaken.
politics.
You see, the
So where does
mechanics
it
of
come from?
executive privilege
The
changed
etymology is
drastically when you
fascinating,
were
honestly.
no
The term
longer
really took
the
hold in
sitting
the
Attorney General.
1850s.
That's a
It comes
huge
from
point.
the Dutch word
As a private
freebeuter
citizen,
and the
she
Spanish
remains
word
legally required to
filibustero.
comply
Which
with a
translates
congressional
directly to
subpoena.
freebooter or pirate, right?
The
Yes.
committee is demanding answers on
Specifically,
exactly
the
how the Epstein
mercenaries and
files were
pirates
handled,
who
why
raided
survivors
Caribbean
were put at
islands and
risk,
Latin American
and who made the
countries
final
during that
decisions
era.
on those
So they were
redactions.
calling these
So they
distinguished
aren't
senators
letting this drop.
pirates.
They are
Pretty
refusing
much.
to let the
The
investigation
term
die
entered the
with her
political
employment.
lexicon
Well, we have
because
covered a
observers
massive amount of ground
recognized
today,
behavior.
and when you pull all of these
Senators who
sources
talked
together,
for hours
a very
were
clear
literally
picture
hijacking the
emerges.
Senate
It really
floor.
does.
Like taking the
Pam
government
Bondi
hostage,
was
just
caught
like
in
a
a
pirate taking
crossfire
over a
of her
ship.
own
Exactly.
making. On
So
one
let's
side,
track how
she
the Senate
alienated
tried
the
to fight
American
off these
public with a
legislative pirates.
catastrophic 3
Because
million
as the
page
country
release
grew,
of the
I
Epstein
mean, you couldn't
files.
just have
Right.
one
A
person
release
shut
that
down the
defied
entire
legal
government for
mandates,
weeks on end.
shielded
No, you couldn't.
powerful
But it took a
VIPs
long time to
and
build a
exposed
defense.
the
By the
very
early
victims
20th
the law was
century,
designed
these
to
marathon
protect.
speeches
And
became
on the other side,
catastrophic for a
She
modernizing
alienated the
nation.
I
president
can
who gave
imagine.
her the job.
So finally, in
Exactly.
She lost her
1917,
position
President
because she
Woodrow
couldn't
Wilson
successfully
pushed the
deliver the
Senate to
political
adopt Rule
prosecutions her
22.
boss demanded.
This
She
rule
stumbled
created
into
a
federal
formal
court
process
using
called
illegally
cloture,
appointed
Cloture, okay.
prosecutors
which is
and
simply
had
a
her
mechanism
cases
to force
swiftly
an end to
thrown out
debate.
by judges.
But she couldn't
Here's the
act as a
catch.
political
It
weapon,
required
so she
a
was
massive
removed.
This
two-thirds
raises an
majority
important
vote
question,
to
though.
trigger.
Two-thirds,
What's
wow.
We
Which
have
is an
spent a
incredibly
lot of
steep
time
hill to
talking
climb.
about the
So
structural
stiff
guardrails
that over the
of
next
the
4
justice system.
decades, the Senate
The
only
judges
managed to
who
successfully
threw out
invoke
the illegal
cloture 5
appointments,
times.
the states
That
who
is
refused
wild.
to hand over
Yeah.
voter rolls,
Southern senators
the
famously
congressional
used this
committees issuing
exact tool to
subpoenas.
block
And the guardrails
civil rights
held.
legislation
They
for
did.
years.
But they held
The
this
gridlock
time
grew so
mostly
intense
because
that
of
in
procedural errors
1975,
and
the
basic
Senate lowered that
incompetence.
threshold
Wow,
from
yeah.
2/3 down to
The
60
Department of Justice
out of the
was designed to be a
100 total
fiercely
senators.
independent pillar of the rule
okay.
of law.
And that 60
But
vote
when an
threshold is
attorney
the number
general
that
is
dominates our
fired
politics today.
specifically
Exactly.
for not acting
But
as a
here is where I
political
think a
weapon,
lot of people get
what does that
confused.
mean for the person
When
who
we hear
takes
the word
job
filibuster,
That's
we
a
don't
chilling
just think
thought.
of a
If the
60
Department
vote
of
math
Justice's
problem.
independence
We
relies
picture
on a
Jimmy
prosecutor
Stewart and
failing
Mr. Smith
to
goes
bypass
to
the
Washington.
law.
Right, the
Are
classic
those
movie
guardrails
scene.
actually
We
strong
picture
enough
a
to
single
withstand
person standing
an
at a
attorney
podium,
general
reading the phone
who
book,
knows exactly
sweating
how
and
to
refusing
dismantle
to
them?
sit down?
Will they
But
uphold the law
senators rarely
or
do that
simply act
anymore.
as a
Why don't
loyal
they have to
soldier?
physically
That
talk
is the
today?
crucial unknown.
That is a
As
crucial
Todd
piece of
Blanche
the
steps
puzzle.
into the
So,
interim
in the
role,
1970s,
the
the
blueprint
Senate
for what the
created
Oval
something
Office
called the
expects is
two-track
out in the
system.
open.
Two-track
friction
system. How did
between
that
the law
work?
and
Well,
absolute
before the
loyalty has
system,
never
a
been
filibuster
Thank you
stopped
for
all
joining us
Senate
on this
business
deep dive.
completely.
Keep asking
Nothing
hard
else could happen.
questions.
The
Keep
Senate
challenging what
realized
you
they had
hear
a whole
and stay
country to run, so they
insanely
changed the
curious.
procedure.
Makes
You are
sense.
now armed with the
Under the
facts
new
behind
system,
the
if a
headlines,
senator
so when you see
simply
the next
threatens
move
to
from the
filibuster
Department
a
of
bill,
Justice,
you
the
will know
Senate
exactly
leadership
what
would
is
just set
happening
that
beneath the
controversial
surface
bill
and
aside on a
exactly how
different
the
track
gears of
and move
power
on
are
to other
actually
business.
turning.